Some players like to play a risky opening, and that is why the King's Gambit was born. So the game starts with e4, and after black replies symmetrically with e5, white plays a daring move f4. And this is the King's Gambit. White is gambiting a pawn over here. And the idea is, if black captures this pawn, then white would have successfully deviated black's center pawn to the side of the board, and now it becomes easier for white to take a strong central control with the move d4. Look how beautiful and strong these pawns are in the center of the board, controlling all of these important key squares in the black's territory. Not only white has got a strong center, but now white is attacking this pawn with his bishop over here, and since this f file is semi-open, white's idea is to quickly develop his pieces and launch a strong attack on the weak f7 square in black's territory. And that attack would be done by this bishop over here by coming on this square. This knight may jump to either this square or this square, putting more pressure on this square. After castling, this rook would be coming on the open f file, putting a lot more pressure on this f7 pawn, as well as this queen can join the attack by coming on the f3 square, and then black would have to deal with a very deadly attack launched by white. So that's the whole idea of sacrificing a pawn by playing the King's Gambit. Obviously, black is not gonna sit with a chilled beer and let white attack. He's gonna have his own counter-attacking moves. So let's see what happens in the King's Gambit. So now, since you have already understood the basic idea of why the King's Gambit is played, now I'll show you why it may not be a sound idea to play as white. Because by playing f4, you have seriously weakened this e1 h4 diagonal, which can be exploited by black's pieces to launch an attack on the white's king. Not only this diagonal is weakened, but if you look at, even this diagonal is weakened, which can be taken advantage by black's pieces by getting his dark squared bishop on this diagonal. So although white has his own strong attacking plan, black also has some plans of counter-attacking this white king, whose safety has been compromised because of the move f4. And now from here onwards, black has two options. Either he can choose to accept this free pawn, or he can play any other move like d5 or d6 or c6 or maybe h5 or knight to c6, any other move, and totally reject to capture this free pawn over here. Depending on what black chooses to play over here, we have two main lines in the King's Gambit. If he accepts the pawn, then we have the King's Gambit accepted variation, and if he chooses to reject this pawn, then we have the King's Gambit declined variations. Let's look at some of the lines in both of these variations. But before that, do like this video and subscribe to my channel. So the first variation is the King's Gambit accepted King's Knight's Gambit. So since it's the King's Gambit accepted variation, that means black has accepted to capture this free pawn over here. And now, because this diagonal is weak and open and is vulnerable to attack by black's queen, instead of going for d4 straight, white first plays knight to f3, developing a kingside minor piece as well as stopping black to launch a deadly attack on white's king. White will generally here follow up with bishop c4 followed by kingside castling, and will then focus to launch a deadly attack on the weak f7 square. This is the King's Knight's Gambit variation. Let's look at another way how white can respond to. So a lot of players here, instead of developing their knight, they will go for the move bishop to c4. The idea is to put direct pressure on this f7 pawn. And if here black exploits this weak diagonal by getting his queen on the h4 square, checking the white king, then white cannot block this check with this pawn, because black will simply capture this pawn with a threat to reveal a discovered check while attacking this trapped rook over here. So therefore, when white is playing bishop c4 over here, he is mentally prepared that in case of this deadly check, he will move his king to the f1 square. White will then try to develop his knight on the f3 square and would win a tempo by attacking this queen over here. White will then focus to build a strong center and activate his pieces so that they all can start a deadly attack against black's weak f7 pawn. Now let's look at another variation. So after f4, black might not accept the gambit. Black might choose to reject the gambit by playing d5, and this line is called as the fork-pair counter gambit. So instead of capturing this pawn and trying to give any sort of advantage or activity to white on this semi-open file, black counter-attacks in the center and opens up lines for his pieces. Another way black can choose to play is to go into the classical line of the King's Gambit declined variation. So instead of challenging the center, black might play bishop to c5. The idea is, since these diagonals have been weakened for the white king because of this pawn moving ahead, black wants to take immediately control of this weakened diagonal and prevent white's king from castling kingside. I'm sure you must be eager to learn all of these variations in detail, but I'll cover them in my next video. And now before you go, here is the question of the day for you. It is Black's turn in the game and you have to find the best move for Black. Let me know your answers in the comments box and do not forget to join to the channel's membership program.